So welcome to the node.js Technical Steering Committee meeting for April 22nd, 2022. The agenda as was in the issue opened in the TSC repo. Before we get started though, are there any announcements people would like to share? Nobody else is going to mention it. I think we should mention Node version 16 was released this week, yay. It's on track to become the next LTS in October, and thanks to Beth and all of the release team that helped make that happen. In terms of updates from the CPC or the board, there is a board meeting tomorrow. I don't have anything specifically from the node side to bring to the board. On the CPC side, you know, sort of nothing, I think nothing specific to call out. There are some interesting discussions in terms of, you know, some brainstorming on JavaScript Landia, as well as, let's see, the last one was around like, sort of how do we put together a vision of, you know, what projects, you know, would make sense in the foundation and all that, but so far still it's sort of brainstorming session. So just mentioning as interesting things going on, if you have any interest to sort of come join those meetings and get involved. So let's move on to the issues tagged for the agenda. The first one is 37678. So this is Node's version 16. So Bethany, I think this one was probably on for awareness. Is that right?
Yeah, it can be removed now. So yeah.
Okay, is it still open? It's closed. Okay, so it'll just be version went out. It will not show up next time. Went out, closed. Okay, the next one is deps add yarn 122.5. So that's pull number 37277. We have issue 1012 where we've been discussing a vote on that. And I looked and I don't see any real discussion in the last week. So I think it's kind of, the discussion's petered out. From my understanding, the current proposal is that we use RCV for the voting method, and that the question should be, you know, add core pack, add yarn, leave things as is, where you would sort of rank order those. I'm thinking, you know, I wanted to see in this meeting if there was any, you know, any more concerns or objections. Otherwise, I think we should go ahead and schedule a vote on that. Does that make sense to everybody?
One of the things that I would add is it's more a generic direction versus land that PR as is. So
right, okay.
It's especially core pack is very young. So it's probably better to bless it as experimental, like, and then iterate.
Right, okay.
There are still some caveats on Windows and other things, so probably it needs to be like as more, I don't know, as an approach versus the PR, LGTMing the PR as is.
Right, yeah, okay. Yep.
This was called out some other times somewhere else in the discussion, but I think it got lost in the in the thread.
Yeah, no, I think that's a key thing. So, so needs work review, and let's see what to say. So I'm just adding voters on general direction, not land as is. PRs need work review and maybe experimental, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, yeah, no, that's a very important point. So, any other questions on that? I think like my next step would be to take this. I'll send it to an email for the TSC, basically with the, hey, we'll start the vote by the end of this week unless there's objections, kind of thing. Early next week unless there's objections. That makes sense. Okay. And is to send this to TSC email and then schedule vote for. Okay, good. Let's move on to the next one unless there's anything else. Okay, the next one is TLS, improve compliance with shutdown standard, remove hacks. I do believe we discussed this last time. I'm almost wondering if we meant to take it off the Yeah, it says remove TSC agenda since we discussed and there's no blocking objections. Maybe I just forgot to remove the agenda tag. So I'm going to remove the agenda tag. Let me just make sure somebody didn't re-add it. Nope. Okay. I just forgot to remove the agenda tags. That's good. I'll take that off. Where is that? The next one is number 3864, rename default branch from master to main. So this is something ongoing. I don't know if there's anything specific to discuss unless anybody has any updates on that.
Michael, Tobias wants to be.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Current direction. Thanks.
Okay, so let's move on to the next one, which is 3697, migration of core modules to primordials. Just opening that up. Mateo, is there any chance you added that?
Wait a second.
No, it was
Yeah, I did.
Antoine, yeah.
I added it, but Matthew has added the TSC agenda on another PR, which has been closed since. So I thought maybe we can still discuss the issue. So basically what happened is or maybe Matthew, you want to go ahead and tell the story?
Yeah, so my my take here is that we should be really careful in doing that and avoid situations like the one it happened with HTTP. So, you know, it's because of some changes in some very sensitive area of the code base that were not benchmarked against others or were not benchmarked at all in certain cases, we had significant regression on HTTP, but also like 20% on streams on like it was you know, it's the work was done without enough review. So it's very important that the code is reviewed by is reviewed more closely. I'm not sure if we want to keep pushing this activity or not, but even if we do, it needs to be definitely watched way more closely to avoid situation like, because identifying those problems is very hard. Because like the way I did identify the problem was that it's because I did essentially an enormous bisect over 1 year's worth of commits. And each one of the step was slowing things down. So, you know, it was, you could see that every month the performance was decreasing extremely slowly. And it was very, like, you need to run the benchmarks for a very long time to actually detect it. So it was very like small. Each one of them was not big, was very small. So this is the main, like and this is where it gets tricky, because you might see that a change on itself, it doesn't move much, but all of them combined will move the needle and a lot. So I just wanted to, you know, ask for opinions here. I'm basically, it was not simple to detect the problem. Like knowing that we had a problem was, and then I followed some hunch and I saw some of them in the flame graph, so that I was able to pinpoint the areas, but it was like to some extent a death of 1,000 cuts to some extent, rather than one single blow like the other fixes. So the other ones that we had to revert, so which were simple to identify. Okay, so I just wanted to ask
So
to ask the floor.
So
go ahead.
I understand that the performance debugging can be really tricky and complex. So is it that the primordials are good replacement for the core modules when they are standalone, but when they combine together in a specific format, they start eating up the performance? Or is it that we never had a systematic study that the primordial alternatives are a true replacement or not in terms of performance?
Some of them are good replacements, some of them aren't. Now, Antoine is probably know about these, what is actually causing the exact problem more than me, because I only identify the area and then I fire the cannon at it. Basically, destroying everything on the path. And Antoine was able to probably identify and explain what exactly is not working as we think it would work. Because I don't have a clue. So maybe Antoine is probably better than me at answering that question.
It's quite tricky actually to find out which one are harmful and which one aren't. It's V8 magic, I guess. But yeah, there are some that we know now for sure that are harmful with this current V8 version. But yeah, sometimes we have surprises. I have a question: is how, when reviewing such a PR, we can know which is a hot path and when it's not? Do we have to know that by heart, or
that is one of the problems. That is one of the problems. Most of this, it's not documented anywhere. So this is part of node.js lore that we might want to extract. I was one of the ones that completely caught me very much by surprise that it landed was the one that touched async hooks. Like, that's the probably most sensitive performance area of Node.js. And, before somebody touches that code base, when I land something that touches that, I typically ask for 10 people to review my changes. And the PR landed with just 1 or 2 GTMs and very little attention. And this is the type of things that surprise me a lot. Okay. And like these, to clarify, that was one example of something that did not land with enough review. Also because there is so many things that can go wrong in that code path that are, it's very, after working on it, it's something that I would not recommend to anybody to touch. There's code that I would say do not touch. If you don't know what you're doing, this is not a beginner friendly land. If you haven't worked in async, if you don't spend a couple of weeks working on top of async hooks, probably not the area where you want to touch to do some high level replacement without, digging deep in what the code actually does. Okay, this is one example. Others were absolutely tricky and did not would not have been easy to catch them. So there were not in areas that I would consider hot paths at all. So that is but they were on a very long chain of, of a response chain of an hot path, essentially. But by themselves, they were not a big problem on the single same run method, but they destroyed some of the inlining magic that V8 did, causing the problem. So it's in some cases it was actually not even possible to detect them. And the worst one at all was it was not even related to another one. So one was I don't remember which one landed, Antoine, in the end. But there was some other few that were like, oh, this should not be a problem, but in fact it was. And I was very much surprised that actually turned out to be a problem. So in some cases, it's actually very simple to spot. In other cases, it's not. But I think we should try to document the so-called hot paths in some way in the code base. If when we spot them, that might be a good action for people, so that they don't, so they know when somebody opens the code, it's, well, be careful, this is a hot path, don't touch, essentially. Or anyway, it's not don't touch, but touch with extreme care.
Yeah, run more tests or whatever. And I guess that's my question here. Is there something, can we do something beyond giving the TSC members like the heads up to look more carefully at some of these? Is there something we'd want to change in terms of our processes or reviews or anything like that?
This is not, I don't know.
Okay, so no, you're not suggesting that necessarily.
I'm not suggesting that necessarily. I am suggesting, be more careful. Let's be more careful when landing those, and not and do more accurate testing, even on areas that are not strictly just not microbenchmark that thing, but also like my generic test for detecting regressions is HTTP simple. It can catch all sorts of regressions in Node Core. It can catch regressions on timers, next tick, streams, async. It's everywhere. Okay, and but it won't be like a big jump. It will be a few percentage point up and down on that specific benchmark. But it's typically one that I recommend running as an example, because it will, most of the time it will actually touch some, if we made some mistakes, it will show.
Is that something we can add to the collaborators guide? Like, it's good to give the TSC members a heads up, but unless these are Semver major, the TSC members won't necessarily see them, right? And
this is, I would probably, we can probably make some FAQ or something related to these primordial changes, so that and write some text down. That would be nice, so that it's there, so people know that primordials are there, but they might or might not cause performance degradation depending on where and how you use them, and maybe list the ones that are known to be cause performance problems in certain cases, and so on. I don't know, Antoine, you're probably worked a lot more than me on that area. I've been more or less on the fringe, so most of my take is mostly on HTTP streams and so on. So.
Yeah, I think the issue is the HTTP simple benchmark doesn't run on Jenkins. I'm not sure why, but I guess that's why many problems haven't been caught when doing the reviews. It just stops after a few hours, maybe it times out. So maybe that's something we could try to fix to improve the workflow and say every time there's a primordial change, run this benchmark.
Yeah, that kind of like, if we had some solid extra steps or suggestions, I think it'd make it much more likely that we can have people do the right thing. So that FAQ, do we, would we have a volunteer to champion getting that written?
I can probably write something really too broad to make some sense. So I'm probably not the best person to say. My recommendation would be, if you don't know what you're doing, don't do them. So it's I'm probably not the right person to write such a guide.
I mean, I can try. Where would we put this Q&A or FAQ?
Under the docs guides, there's various sort of, guidance type stuff. So we could put something underneath there, which is like working with primordials, or That's my first guess, unless somebody has a better suggestion. Okay, so Antoine, if you're volunteering to write the first draft of that, would be great, and I'm sure other people like Matteo can add his suggestions. But if you can do the first cut, I think that'll kick things off and get it moved forward, right?
Okay.
Just one question: is there any fundamental technical reasons why primordials are slower sometimes? Like, do we think it's possible for V8 to sort out the difference in performance in a future release? Has it been raised to V8?
It has not been raised to V8, and I think we didn't understand exactly. We understand the ones that were more problematic, for example, array prototype push, those ones, I think, Michael, you have done probably, Michael Targos, whatever. You have done probably more, some more analysis on those, but I don't necessarily know why. Like
No,
it's
and I don't really know either. I think we need to come up with some benchmark that shows the difference between using primordials and the built-ins, and open an issue on the V8 tracker. Because I don't remember if we pinged the V8 team on those issues in Node, but from what I experienced recently, they don't seem to be to be answering the calls when we ping them.
Maybe we can reach out to Francisca and see if she can help in terms of getting the V8 team engaged.
She hasn't been on the V8 team in a long time, but she probably knows who all the people are still.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think, like, who do we have from Google, right? If there's somebody better, but
This feels like one of those that might take up a lot of time in the future, these kind of issues. So it might be worth trying to push it a little bit that way to make it a non-issue.
okay, well, I guess our next step is to write that FAQ. I don't know, Robert, if, in terms of, I guess we need like an example, right?
Yeah. Another question, right? I don't remember which PR it was. I think it was that I actually, do we like pause this primordial, moving everything to primordials thing now until we have some guidance, or we just continue on as we used to? Like, do we actually change anything other than this fact?
I think what we need to do is benchmark it more carefully.
Rich says proceed, but with far more caution.
The question mark at the end.
Yeah,
Right.
sorry.
Like the emoji, it's very important to include it for context.
Okay, so that seems to be the case. Proceed, but with more caution, with the FAQ being part of the, to outline what that more caution would be, I think, right?
Is there agreement that we want to do that and not pause it for a bit or anything? I mean, I'm kind of looking at Matteo mostly. But,
yeah, I would, from my point of view, I would pause for a bit, but that would be my recommendation. Generically, if we are careful in not landing, like, there is one that was moved through that was open recently on events, and this is one of the other that will events. No, don't touch that bit. Okay, it has a destroying potential to some extent, but it really depends. So it's fine, to be honest. So we can continue as long as we know this is happening and we are aware of it. I don't have a good answer. Okay, it's not great if these type of regressions happen, because people will benchmark the new major release, and I spotted it by chance. This is what worries me is that if we don't do anything, we will be in the same situation for V17. So it's that's it. Okay, so sorry not to have. I would love to have a better solution here, but probably the best thing will be to do the guide. So.
Okay, any more discussion on that one before we move on to the next topic?
Could we consider running benchmark regularly on Node.js master to spot those kind of regressions?
I think that's a great idea. And we used to run nightly benchmarks, but we don't have the people who've been volunteering to do that and keep an eye on it. And so it would be great, but we just haven't managed to be able to have benchmarks running continuously and tracking the progress. Yeah, Richard mentioned the benchmarking.nodejs.org used to have benchmarks, but we've disbanded. We decharted the working group because the interest kind of petered out. So they used to be run once a night, and there was a graph generated and stuff. But yeah, it's the machine that they were running on doesn't exist. We haven't updated for latest versions. I'd actually tried to remove those graphs. I just didn't get through the full process of getting them so they don't show up anymore. But that would be good if somebody is listening and does have an interest in helping out with that.
And you were heavily involved in it, Michael. So I'm sure if somebody here wanted to take it on, you probably could tell them what the problems are. And
yep. Yeah, definitely. I could help, if somebody was interested in sort of reviving that. The benchmarks that were run were sort of the more macro benchmarks. We had also looked at can we run all of the benchmarks, but it was, we never got to the point where here's the subset of the benchmarks that would make sense. Maybe, in the context of primordials, people could come up with here's the subset of the micro benchmarks that would make sense to run and run those or something. But again, it's around if somebody's interested and got the cycles, I'd be happy to help them get it going. Any other things before we move to the rest of the agenda? Not okay. Let's move on to the next one, which is Moderation Team Certification 1014. So Rich, what's the next steps on this one?
I'm sorry, I was multitasking. What topic are we on?
We are on the certification.
Moderation. Yeah. So I was not much has happened. There haven't been any new nominations. So my intention was to wait for the TSC chair election to be resolved before, and then just open a vote for TSC and ComCom to recertify everyone.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so the next one is revisit the meeting times. I think last week we agreed to leave the meeting time in place this week because there were a few people who hadn't filled it out. I think that I see a few more comments of people who have filled it out. I assume Antoine and Robert, you've managed to fill it out as well, right? I'm suggesting we just ask Chalker to do another pass of the data review, and then we'll update to the suggested times. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And we'll try and do that. Well, we'll see how quickly we can do it. But if we can do it for next week, we'll do it for next week. Okay, let me just put that. Okay, the next one is nominations for TSC membership. This is 1,000. I think I saw an email from you, Rich. You'd sent that out to start the confirmation on that.
Yeah,
are we ready to confirm, or we have to wait a little bit?
No, we have 11 or 12 replies in email already, so we have enough, unless anybody here wants to say nay, hold up, and have enough people say sure, let's wait or something, which I don't expect to happen. So you probably want to list out all the votes in there, Michael, is that right? You want me to read them off to you so you can type them into the minutes, or is that not a good use of time right now?
Yeah, what does the, it says we need to have a vote, right? So
yeah, it does. The charter,
okay.
The charter indicates, I think the charter says we have to vote.
Sure, why don't you, or do you want to paste them into the chat, and I'll cut and paste them in?
Okay, so you already got Girish and Tobias in the chat already with +1. And then from email, there's other +1, other plus. Okay, Miles, Dan, Mary. I should probably mute my microphone while I murmur. All right, hopefully I didn't think about the copy pastableness of having them in separate chats like that, but 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We have 11, 12 yes votes. I don't think anybody here hasn't voted. So, and there's 19 TSC members. So I think that, right, we can say that unanimously passed with 7 non-participants, but we also only opened the vote like a few hours ago. So I think that's okay.
Plus 12 plus 1 votes, no objections, confirming as elected, right?
I think we can see that, yes.
That's good. So
congratulations, everybody.
Yeah, welcome. And that's good because
congratulations and welcome.
I'm going to start doing the various onboarding tests right now while this meeting is happening.
Sounds good. That's great because there was the other question was whether for the yarn vote we should onboard people in advance. So it's great that we have, and that becomes a non-issue.
Great, get thrown into the fire right away.
Exactly. Okay. The next one is any interest in an RFC process, 962. So I don't know, Rich, if there's any. I know you'd mentioned that a couple times.
Let's go ahead and take this off of the agenda. I'll leave the issue open. I'm gonna come back to it at some point, but I just don't. Yeah, it's going to take me a couple weeks. So rather than have me kick the can down the road every meeting, let's just take it off the agenda and I'll re-add it when it's ready.
Sounds perfect. I'm going to just take off the agenda. Done. Okay, the next issue is Apple Silicon Plan. This is 866. I'm thinking we can take this off the agenda since we
think
went
we
out
can
with
close it.
releases, right? Yeah.
I think we can close it.
Yay.
There is also a pinned issue on the main node repo that we might want to unpin and close that. I'm actually going to do that right now.
Okay, and I'll close this issue.
Oh no, the one that was already unpinned, so fine.
Okay. Good, so that's closed. Perfect. Potential stagnation of open issues in H1 bounty program. So I've been working with SNCC and the OpenJS Foundation in terms of like finding a home for the backlog. Currently working on a blog post, which would go along to sort of explain how we're handling that. So that I think should be within the next week going to the TSC. Basically say this is what the plan is, and hopefully we can get that closed out, not too much longer. Okay, so we can go and take a look on the strategic initiatives. So let's take a quick look there. Core promise APIs, is there anything you want to update on that, Matteo?
Not so far.
I guess the one thing that was good that 16 has some new promise APIs for timers. So that's shows some progress, which is good. Let's see, V8 currency, Michael, anything on that?
Yes, so I can mention that there are some issues with the next V8 version, and I personally don't know how to handle them. So if someone wants to take a look at the pull request I opened, that would be very appreciated. So it's
Are they on particular platforms or just in general?
Yes, one of them is on Windows. It's an issue with the abort on uncaught exception flag. And the other one, I don't remember now. It's with Linux perf. And I have no idea what this is, so cannot tell more. It's a test that we only run when we update V8. So I guess it's to catch regressions, which seem to have happened now.
Yeah, I think it's that we did something at one point, if I remember, where we broke the perf support. Okay, well, that's a good heads up for people who are have knowledge in those areas to try and help and get involved. In terms of build resources, I don't have any update on that.
I don't know if it was said, but we have two M1s. The two M1s are online, I think.
Yep, that is true. So that's not necessarily related to the build resource, but thank you very much we have two M1s, two additional M1s at Nearform now. I also did want to make a big thanks to Rod and Richard. Basically, our release machine died like 2 days before our latest release, so it was quite a scramble. And Rod, myself, and Richard, and particularly Rod and Richard, spent a lot of time getting the machine back up and running in time for our 16 release. So that was It's a big thanks that they managed to do that in time for it not to impact our release. So that was great. And then I think that's all the strategic initiatives that we have people here for. So that takes us to the end of the agenda. Is there anything else that we should talk about before we go into the private session? If not, thanks for everybody who's taking the time to come and those who are watching. I will